Well, thank you all for coming. Today we're going to be talking about, I'm Dr. Frank Reilly. I'm from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I've been a vet for about 30 years. And today we're going to be talking about horse breathing problems and the link to laminitis. And I first was kind of brought up to this subject by about 3 or 4 years ago from Farriers here at this exact convention. They were saying, I'm having problems with these horses, these bad breathing horses. I can't keep shoes on their feet. And some of them appeared to be laminitic. And I was like, wait a minute, I think there's something there. We need to look into that and see if that's really something that's truly there. And they were absolutely correct. It really is, it is absolutely fact. And we'll go into one of the things I want to let you know is 2 things. Yes, we sell a breathing powder for horses, so I want to be upfront with you about that. We're not going to be going into that at all. But we have probably over 50 articles on problems with COPD and insulin resistance on our website, and all of them are downloadable. So when I say, and there's those articles on our site, you can go there, you can download them yourself. And I think that's something I've learned from some of the veterinarians here about you've got to have some evidence behind it. It can't all be just opinion. Opinion's helpful, but you need to have some facts behind what you're saying. So those things are on the website. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. All right. So this is what we're going to be going over today. Can you see? Can you see? Okay. What is COPD? What is insulin resistance? We're going to go over those very briefly. You've seen these already. Why do these make each other bad? What are we going to be doing if we don't get one under control? The other one's going to take off. We're going to compare the 2 directly, and then co-management of these things. Many of these horses have the same thing. Their goals, and then we'll have questions. We'll have a good 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So we'll start with COPD, and you've seen these horses with the flared nostrils, puffing underneath you, or while you're underneath them. Horses breathe about 12 to 14 times a minute. These horses are 30, 40. I've had them 80 times a minute. I mean, just blowing like a freight train. And they're not doing anything. They're just standing there blowing. Especially in humid weather, they're a lot worse. In our experience in dealing with these kind of horses, they almost all have some sort of temperature regulatory problem. That they are definitely worse in hot weather. That you can actually pull them out, get them under a cold water hose for 10 or 15 minutes, scrape them off, get them in front of a fan, and all of a sudden you can bring them from 80 down to 30. Well, I didn't cure COPD with a garden hose. So there is a component of problems with these horses being able to actually cool correctly that complicates the COPD and the breathing. This is an endoscopic exam, and you'll see this mucus is at the bottom of the rings of the trachea, and often this is just clear and syrupy looking, almost like saliva. In these horses with COPD, they put out massive amounts of mucus, and then this mucus is just a great breeding ground for just every opportunistic bacteria that's just running around. And these horses often are on just a merry-go-round of antibiotics every 2 months. Oh, he's sick again. He's sick again. He's got a snotty nose. We got to keep going. This was a horse that at a barn that they had called and they said, we're having some problems with our horses. We've had them on all sorts of medications. We can't cure this. And we walked in the barn and it just reeked of mold. And mold being probably the top level of triggers of COPD. And where's this coming from? And these bales were right next to the horse's stall. We flipped them over, and that's what we see. And they're feeding this. They're feeding this. I'm surprised they didn't get colic on top of it. I put this here because a lot of times with horses like this, you want to keep them out, keep them moving, fresh air and all that. But often in these, we would find people with bigger, larger sheds that I'd go in there and I'd look over their property and try to find out what's, he's turned out all the time. Okay, we go into the shed. And a big shed, you look up and it was, 2 stories of cobwebs with dust and everything raining down on you. Another barn I went into, I had to step up into the turnout shed because it had about 18 inches of just dusted, beaten down manure in there. And that's just a ton of organic dust, that's called. And that's been proven in cattle to cause a lot of respiratory infections, same in horses. So when you have turnout sheds, you got to clean them. You can't just think that that's all you need to do. Round bales are a problem. This was at Kansas State University. They researched with this with Dr. Babani. It's great. But her bottom line is that even with drugs and medication, you cannot control COPD in a horse on a round bale. It's just not going to happen. You're fighting City Hall, you're going to lose. So if people like, oh, that's how we make our hay on the farm, I'll say, okay, no problem, but you're going to have to tear pieces of that off, put that in a hay net, and then put it in a bucket of water. And I call this flash soaking. They've done a study out of England that you'll be able to read, that they were able to greatly reduce this organic dust with just 10 minutes of soaking. Not sprinkling it with the hose, that's not going to work. That's other methods, or a quick dunk in the tank and then feed it. You got to be underwater with a brick on top of this, say, for 10 minutes, and that can be very helpful. You don't soak overnight. Okay, that was an old thing that was, oh, for horses with insulin resistance, we're going to knock down the sugars and all that. And there's been several studies where you really jack up the bacterial count of hay. And that's not what we want, right? We've got this syrupy mucus in the horse's throat, and we're not going to be wanting to add more bacteria right in front of his face as he's inhaling it. So flash soaking is good, and also can be helpful for older horses that can't chew as well and have their teeth are starting to go. I put this up here. This is a commercial hay steamer, especially in this part of the area, part of the country. It's too cold to maybe soak. Their hay turns into haysicles. It just covered in ice. We tried this on one of my wife's thoroughbreds. He would die before he'd eat it, and so we're like, okay, that's not going to work. So we did add a whole bunch of salt in the water to try to keep the ice down, and that didn't work too very good. But you have these commercial steamers like at many places. These are about $2,000 a piece. They're not cheap. So on our website, you can go and see there was a gentleman. He took a drywall steamer from Home Depot, and he hooked that thing up to a hose, and he put it into a Rubbermaid container with a hole right there, and then another one that went out, and he created his own steamer for $100. So you can make your own steamer pretty easily, actually. You don't have to spend $2,000, but you can if you'd like. Sweet PDZ is another thing for COPD. Knocks down ammonia counts. These horses that some of these barns you walk into and you just walk the stall and you're like, oh my God, and no wonder these horses are having breathing problems because the ammonia count's so high, especially when they're laying down, right? They're right there. They're half an inch into their bedding. Fans, good circulation is important for these horses. Bedding, I like pine shavings or shredded cardboard. Shredded cardboard, unfortunately, it's great in theory, but it's when you pile it up at your place and then a couple of winds come along, your place starts looking like a trash dump. I mean, it's just paper and cardboard all over the place. So maybe there's some people that have better ways to manage it than the couple places I've seen with it. I like the pine shavings. Sawdust, I'd like to avoid because I've had a couple of these things where did you get your sawdust? Well, I just got it from the tree man who's got a big pile of sawdust. They chip up everything. Well, in there, of course, was black walnut, and then you get laminitis because the horse has been standing and laying in black walnut because your shavings, you don't really know, or your sawdust, you don't know where it's coming from. So it's kind of a gamble. Maybe if you really know where it's coming from. I put this up here, a couple things. So these COPD horses have muscle damage all over their body for several reasons. First of all, they're so busy trying to breathe, they're not eating. If I put a plastic bag on your head and a little hole to try to breathe through, and you're barely able to breathe, and I put a big steak from Morton Steakhouse in front of you, dig in, you'd be like, I'm trying to breathe here, I'm not going to eat. And same with these kind of horses. They're not interested in eating as much as they should. They definitely drink less than they need. They're putting out tremendous calories just in the physical exertion of trying to breathe. Just, and you do that about an hour, you'd be on the floor. You couldn't handle it. So there's a lot of calorie loss too from this. So we've gone through what is COPD very quickly. I think we can recognize that pretty easily. Horses just puffing, having a hard time breathing, always on antibiotics, always with a snotty nose. What's insulin resistance? Easiest thing with insulin resistance, you hear this all the time, it's the #1 cause of laminitis in the world. So it's a pretty important thing for you as farriers and veterinarians to know about. So basically, in a very easy way to understand it, it's a lock and key mechanism. Insulin, after the horse's nutrients are absorbed, will transport proteins and fats and carbohydrates. Often those first two are missed. because everybody goes for the carbohydrate, and it is its biggest job. So it's going to escort that glucose into the cells around the body, okay? And then when it gets to the receptor in that cell, that's the lock, opens it up. So it's escorted it to there, it opens it up, glucose moves in. And with that, glucose levels then start dropping, right? They're into the cell now, they're not in circulation, and the body says, okay, glucose is dropping, so we're going to decrease insulin. Insulin resistance is this lock and key mechanism is broken. And so what happens is it escorts it to the cell, can't get the lock open, can't get the receptor to work, glucose levels stay high. So the body says, okay, pour out some more insulin from the pancreas, okay? More insulin to try to get that out, and try to force it into it, and higher and higher and higher insulins, and all of a sudden we're in laminitis. We've got high insulin, we do blood tests, that horse has got high insulin. Why is that happening? Because we have resistance. The cells are resisting to take this glucose into the cells. So the things that can break this up, actually high insulin itself will then start breaking its own lock and keys. So it's a catch-22 of all of a sudden the high insulin itself is blocking other insulin from working at the cell. ACTH is another one. So in Cushing horses, that also causes another problem, causes higher and higher insulin resistance because ACTH at high levels starts breaking down the lock and key system again, and insulin can't work correctly. So there's why we're getting hand-in-hand problems with horses with Cushing's, causing further insulin resistance from high ACTH. This is a horse called Freedom. He's a Morgan horse. This is a man that was a world championship four-in-hand group down in Mississippi. He said, I want to buy him. He saw him in a magazine. He'd never had a horse in his life. And then a friend of his said, you know, you might have to have these horses looked at, because he had been in his barn for about 6 months, and that was a very big crest. But cool, the four horses were Liberty, Justice, Freedom, and For All. So it's pretty cool. I put this here for older and horses and thin horses can also have insulin resistance, because the biggest user of insulin that glucose is being put into their cells is muscle. And as Dr. Pollitt has said, muscle is the sink of insulin. It lets it drop down. So what happens, and we're going to see this more and more, you're going to hear about this more and more in coming from human medicine, coming to horse medicine, I'd say definitely in the next year or two, is that you get insulin resistance of old age. Okay, that's in people too. How many big, strong, 90-year-old men and women are there? None. You start losing muscle, that's a thing of age. And when you're losing muscle, then you're losing that ability for that insulin to get that glucose into muscle. So the insulin starts moving up and up. You're skinny, that horse has got Cushing's, but that insulin is starting to become more and more higher and higher. So the older horse, even if he doesn't have Cushing's, he becomes insulin resistance from old age. And so often these horses, oh no, my horse can't be an insulin resistant laminitis, which is the vast majority of laminitis, because he's skinny. And no, that's not true. That's not true. Because of course also if he's Cushing's, the ACTH will break those lock and key mechanisms also, so you get a 2 for 1. But just because he's skinny doesn't mean he doesn't have insulin resistance. And then of course the horse with the fat pads on the butt and on the side. These are the hallmarks of insulin resistant, and of course, the granddaddy problem is laminitis. I took a picture of this horse. This is a horse on Missouri Foxtrotter. It was a farm. The girl had gone through like 3 clippers, breaking, trying to get this thing clipped. But I'd seen some hairy Cushing pictures, but I was like, wow, this one's. I need to take a picture of this one. Pretty amazing. You can also see with these kind of horses that he's starting to get the belly starting to drop because he's losing muscle. That starts breaking down, and then he's not fat. He's actually getting kind of pot-bellied. So we're going to compare insulin resistance and COPD. For example, we'll start with COPD, age and sex. COPD is not like child asthma. Most of these horses don't start getting this till like 12 years old or older. All of a sudden, my horse has never had a problem. And now all of a sudden, he's really puffing like a train, especially in the summer. More allergens out there, right? We get our tree allergens in early spring, moving to grass and weeds in later spring and early summer. Then you also get your corn, wheat, and farm products with a lot of pollen into the summer. Then toward the fall, you're going to start getting more mold and with leaves falling, and then like we have now, huge mold counts with lots and lots of rain and lots and lots of leaves. Insulin resistance can occur at any age. There's horses that have had insulin resistant laminitis at age 2 because they've just been overfed. So they can get it at any time. Breed, COPD, it can be in any breed at all. Insulin resistance, there are some that are more prone to it. The Morgan, the Paso Fino, the ponies, I'd say Tennessee Walkers, mountain horses. These are horses that seem to get it a little bit earlier and quicker. Your fit breeds of standardbred and thoroughbred and quarter horse and Arabian and race horses for young horses like that, they're not going to get it as much. They can get it when they get older. But there are some breed predilections. When does it start? We went over that from 2 to 12. How to diagnose COPD, just watching him breathe and seeing how he's having to struggle and all the antibiotics you're probably having to give to try to help him out. Insulin resistance, we do that through, gold standard now is Cairo syrup challenge test, where we'll say a 1,000-pound horse, we'll squirt 70 cc's of red label Cairo syrup, light, L-I-G-H-T, from the grocery store, and we'll test his insulin about an hour later, and if it's over 60, he's insulin resistance, and if he's under 60, he's normal, or he's insulin resistance controlled. So very simple, very cheap test to do, but often in those cases, a lot of times people will just pull an insulin in the middle of the morning or pull an insulin after fasting, and you're creating kind of a false negative result. Only horses that are super insulin resistant are you going to pick up on a resting insulin resistant test. So often your clients might say to you, he's foundered 3 times, he's a big fat pony. We tested his insulin, it's normal. No, not possible. You haven't done the Cairo syrup challenge test, and you're missing this horse. So go back and do it again, do it the right way, because I can tell you, I'd say at least 3/4 of the horses that we had missed in the past after that test came out, we would retest, and we're like, oh my goodness, this horse is insulin resistant. So we found those. Triggers, of course, are allergens for COPD, and then, of course, usually improper feeding and turnout in horses with insulin resistance. I did this picture of this beautiful mare and foal, and I'm going to have a question for you. Just put your hand up, because I think it's an incredible concept that often veterinarians and farriers miss. How many people know all mares become insulin resistant within the last 2 months of pregnancy? Okay, look at this. So you're talking about probably less than 1 in 10 know that. All mares become insulin resistant when I don't care if they're lean and mean, I don't care if they're the big fat mare going in, they're all going to become insulin resistant. So you need to know that. And those horses that are already insulin resistant and then were bred, and then they become more insulin resistant when they become at the last 2 months of pregnancy, right? They go from insulin resistant to super insulin resistant. And then all of a sudden we lose the foal, the mares and laminitis, or both. And we're like, what happened? Or we have a lean and mean thoroughbred mare that's all of a sudden a laminitis. What happened? Well, she's got laminitis, but she can't have laminitis because she's so fit. She was so fit. Well, all of them have insulin, so you need to know that going in. All of a sudden, could you take a look at my mare? She seems a little stiff. Remember that, hey, wait a minute, this horse could be a laminitis. She doesn't have a foot abscess that open running around the field. If it's in the 3rd month of pregnancy, no, you're probably fine. But so these mares need to be managed, especially if they're insulin resistant going into pregnancy. So we've gone over what is COPD and what is insulin resistance and why are these making each other worse. That's really the meat and potatoes of what we're here for today. All right, they're intertwined because of many different things we're going to get into. The treatments for each one of these things can affect each other negatively. Often steroids and clenbuterol are used in treating COPD, also in people. Another type of bronchodilator, salmeterol, but it's the same. That's the top 2 things they always put you right on. Same in horses, but each one of these causes insulin resistant problems. Treatments that can help each other. Turnout can help. More exercise, more movement, more muscle helps that insulin resistant horse. We want them out there moving around. We don't want them in a cracker box dirt lot. That's not going to, and especially if the owners have 50 beautiful acres around, they're like, Doc, we got to do something. And soaking hay can help with both with insulin resistance and with COPD. Thyroid powder can help both of these horses. We're going to get into that. And then vitamin E. You can go on our site. I thought this was something that I was not aware of as a veterinarian until I started getting into this. But there's several studies, and there's at least 4 I think we have on our site in human medicine, all COPD people are vitamin E deficient automatically, and then many of them can be helped with just supplementation. And I was not aware that there was that sort of a problem. And unchecked COPD is your next laminitis case. It's coming because it's going to turn insulin resistant. So if that horse might not have insulin resistance and he's only COPD, but eventually he's going to become COPD. He's going to become insulin resistant, or he's already insulin resistant and it's going to turn into super insulin resistant, and that horse is and you're just coming in there and you're shoeing him and everything's okay. All of a sudden 6 months later, like, oh my God, I think this horse has got laminitis. Big cycle. I wish I had a better picture. It's a little fuzzy. But clenbuterol here is something that I'm going to tell you a story about. It was slightly embarrassing, but you know, we have to tell each other's triumphs and failures. So I had a horse, it's a boy toy, small pony. Been working on it for years. We had him in a great program. We were testing him, and everything was wonderful. He had laminitis, but the last 3 years he was great. I had tested him in like early May, and all his numbers were great. He'd been great, perfect. And she called me about a month later. She says, "I think this horse has got laminitis." I'm like, "No, we just tested him. We just saw him. All his numbers are perfect." Went out there, and of course, yes, he was pounding pulses and, you know, rocking, and I was like, "Holy mackerel, he is in laminitis." And I was, "Are we doing anything different? What are we doing?" She said, "Well, you know, he was having some breathing problems. There was another veterinarian here about a couple days after you were there, and, you know, we put him on just a little bit of steroid, and we put him on clenbuterol." And I was like, "Okay, well, are you still on the steroids?" No, that was just 3 or 4 days. I said, "Okay, are you on the clenbuterol?" "Oh yeah, he's been on that for about a month." And I said, "Well," he said, "do you think that caused a problem?" "I don't know. I've never heard of it. I've never seen it in literature in veterinary medicine. I thought I better check it out." And it's absolutely true. There's a study on our site. You can do that. Clenbuterol increases insulin resistance. So all of a sudden, that bronchodilator is not just a bronchodilator, and that product only works for 5 days, and then it becomes downregulated. They've done that at K-State. They found that so if you give it day 6 and 7 and 8, 9, 10, it's not going to help with bronchodilating your horse. The body accommodates and stops bronchodilating. So when you just go on and on, week and week and week with clenbuterol, all you're doing is just creating more and more insulin going up the ladder. And I didn't know that. Then there was another study in human medicine, and this just blew my mind off. And this is one. I think we could probably dig into it more with horses with this product. Humans had their insulins going up over 350%, and their glucoses go up 150%. Okay, and that's a problem, because all of a sudden now you've got insulin up. Now you've also got glucose up, which is going to further jack up insulin even further. And especially it also complicates with these horses that have high glucoses from too much venipullmin, and then next, of course, from too many steroids. Steroids increase glucose too. What they found in these horses with COPD and people especially is all that glucose running around the body from the steroids increasing glucose, from the clenbuterol increasing glucose, all these things, it makes your lung secretions inside you very sugary. And guess what? Those opportunistic bacteria, that's part of why these horses and people are always on antibiotics, because you have this sugar-laden mucus in their throat. So not just mucus to grow because it's mucus, but sugary mucus. So your horses are basically a giant petri dish, and there's no reason, now you know why. But of course, you know, steroids is a problem simply because you're losing muscle. Steroids break down muscle to produce glucose. So these COPD horses are getting less and less muscle. They're going to move less, and because they're moving less, they're going to have all sorts of more insulin-resistant problems because of the higher and higher glucose levels. The body's going to go pour out insulin to try to control that, and that's a problem. So often these COPD horses, you have to be careful with, "Doc, he's been on Pred-Taz for about 3-4 months, and be careful, especially if he's a insulin-resistant prone horse, a Rocky Mountain horse, or that's probably not good. We better check in on that, because that's going to be your next laminitis case." So every time you see these bottles of prednisolone and venipullmin up there, hey, which one is that? Because that's the horse you need to keep an eye on. Make a little notation that that's a COPD horse, and I need to keep an eye on those feet. Thyroid powder, that's good for both of these conditions. Tufts University, you can download it, proved that it does help insulin sensitivity. Also helps with the immune system of horses and in people. Also helps with muscle metabolism, so that, of course, that helps with COPD breathing, and in insulin resistance. But here's another one that just, when we were digging in on this, again, I didn't know this, I just stumbled into it actually, and then all of a sudden there was this plethora of recent research. Thyroid powder helping with decreasing pain in a horse's feet. What? What did he say? Thyroid powder is going to be helping with getting those horses comfortable. They're in laminitis crisis, and you can download 3 articles there on that. They've taken nerves that they've dissected, bathed them in levothyroxine, and these nerves repair much, much, much faster in these, and that's what we're having these horses often damaged nerves in their feet. So it's really incredible that we're not only helping with metabolism, we're also, I tell people now, hey, why don't you try to get them on some thyroid powder to help maybe with not only insulin resistance and with COPD breathing, but also with foot comfort. That's important. I put this picture here. I'm sure you guys recognize these people, or the one at least. Hawkeye Pierce, MASH 4077. And this is a young, very, very young doctor, obviously. And people will say, Dr. Reilly, why do you want to have thyroid? Why do you want to put him on thyroid powder? We tested his thyroid. It's normal. Oh, yeah. Oh, I understand. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It is. It's going to be in the normal range. You send it to Cornell, it'll be 1 to 3. It'll be right in there. But what happened is often it'll be, most times, insulin resistant and COPD, very low end of normal, very low, 1.2, 1.3. And I'll tell people, okay, well, if you got in a car wreck and you had Dr. A, and Dr. A was there and he had graduated a year ago and he's got his license, and you got Dr. B, he's been doing it for 30 years, tons of experience, wrote 2 books on surgery, been around the world, okay, and has a license. They're both normal, everything's normal. Which one do you want? You want the high end of normal. So we're looking for is, I want that horse at 2.5, 2.8. I want him at the top end of good, okay, not just barely okay. And oh yeah, they said it's okay. Get those numbers. Do not accept it's normal. Get the numbers and say, okay, what can we do to make it maybe a little bit better? One of the things also with COPD, which was interesting, and in human medicine too, was another thing that was shocking. All these COPD people, they have true hypothyroidism, okay, because of hypoxia and the inflammatory mediators of COPD. The brain's thyroid stimulating hormone starts dropping, and all of a sudden thyroid production is where it's supposed to go to. Thyroid T4, levothyroxine, starts dropping. And so all of a sudden, you're getting this interaction of inflammatory and hormonal changes that are happening to these horses. So as veterinarians and farriers, we're trying to put these laminitises in these nice little shoe boxes, right? This is endocrine laminitis, and this is SEERS, systemic inflammatory response, and this is traumatic laminitis. Well, these are all mixing into each other. They're all pouring in. So the inflammatory components of COPD are dropping thyroid. Now, if you already have a horse that's barely normal and from insulin resistance, it could really be a true hypothyroid horse. So get these horses tested. And it's amazing about the veterinarians and the people, like, I can't believe it. It's so low, barely maybe normal. But again, we want top levels, we want top doc, we don't want baby doc. So we talked about COPD churning insulin with steroids, with glucose, with clenbuterol. Let me check my time here, I'm not sure. Okay, we're good. High fat, the problem with that is a lot of these horses with COPD, they got the skinniitis, right? Because they're having problems breathing and they're not eating enough and all that. I'm going to start pouring the corn oil to them. Well, the problem is they've done studies on that, and you can download that too, where they've done fat infusions on these horses and have instantly been able to start causing insulin resistance. So high fat's not the answer. We don't want that. That's going to start going backwards and causing insulin resistant problems. Low exercise, low circulation, low oxygen, low muscle from these COPD problems. What's that going to do for that foot quality that you're working on? And all of a sudden these horses are losing shoes and, oh my God, you're back again. You got to do it again and again and again. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, this is a horse you've been treating for COPD. We need to get on that. You need to talk to them and say, hey, wait a minute, we need to make sure this horse is under control. These feet are falling apart or becoming maybe closing in on laminitis because of COPD. They eat, drink and eat less. Infections. Now this is another one that often veterinarians and farriers are not aware of. Infections of any kind cause insulin resistance if they go within 2 to 3 days beyond that. So all of a sudden you start thinking, okay, Why is insulin resistance the #1 cause of laminitis in the world? Well, because there's a lot of triggers there. There's a lot of triggers, not just nutrition, but all of a sudden my horse has got pneumonia, and all of a sudden he's in laminitis. Well, he's insulin resistant. Now he also could be toxic, but remember all these things. Guess what also endotoxemia causes? Insulin resistance. So you've got all these things that are pushing toward insulin resistance beyond just the metabolic horse being big. So that's important for you to understand. And often when you know, so the Potomac horse fever horse, and he's starting to get laminitic. Well, there's these horses, hospitalized horses, hospitalized people. These become insulin resistant too. You can be very fit, but when you're in that hospital for 7 days and you're not sleeping and people are poking at you all the time and you're not drinking right, people become insulin resistant, hospitalized. Low end of thyroid we talked about. The pituitary gland, horses with Cushing's, and as a side note off here, which was interesting is hypoxia of COPD in people damages dopamine receptors in the brain, okay? Also on top of that, there's the hypoxia part, and guess what other little friend causes decreases in dopamine receptors in the brain? Clenbuterol. So all of a sudden your clenbuterol that you're giving for that COPD, which is a great product, I love it, for 5 days. But it's when it's overuse and overuse and overuse because we think that that's going to keep the COPD down. You've got problems. And that's a concept in veterinary medicine that is nowhere. Nowhere. It's not anywhere. And all of a sudden, wait a minute. Clenbuterol in studies in human, and I think it was in rats actually, that are knocking down dopamine receptors. Holy mackerel. So now we're getting into a whole new tumble of problems of Cushing's, complicating problems with COPD. More weight loss, more glucose increases with the high ACTH, more breaking the keys of insulin, you know, a lot of problems. So the pituitary gland, all of a sudden you're getting some small complications in here. And vitamin E, and that's very well documented. There's I've got at least 3 or 4, articles on that of vitamin E being very low in people with COPD. And you test these horses, it's low. It's low. They're very oxidative. I put this here also for horses that are being managed for insulin resistance, but that's not helping COPD. So what happens is you're kind of kicking each other's diseases in the shins, and you're not helping here. Dirt lots full of organic dust. We want them out in a nice pasture if we can get them out there. We can control that. We can do it with slow adaptation to grazing, insulin testing along the way, muzzles, this sort of thing. We can find the sweet spot. Once we get the insulin under control, then we go back out there. And it might take 2 or 3 months to say, you're on a dirt lot for 2 or 3 months, but we're going to get you under control, and then we'll start maybe turning you out, especially on grass that's 4 or 5 inches higher, which is at less sugars. We'll turn you out maybe more in the nighttime when sugars are lower, and we can work on that. But often the thyroid problem has not been addressed in these horses with insulin resistance, and so because of that, we're getting some more COPD problems. They're underfed. Often these horses that have insulin resistance, I'll get people will send me their information. And I'll say, yeah, I'm feeding them a light feed. How much are you feeding? I'm feeding them 2 coffee cups. I'm like, okay, well the bag on that, you still have to feed 10 pounds of that particular light feed. So you're not getting the micronutrients that you need, and guess what happens to that foot quality? Falling apart. So these insulin-resistant horses, they're not getting fed right, and they're getting high insulin, inflaming their feet and causing hoof quality to go down. Gee, I wonder why you're having problems as a farrier keeping shoes on. Well, that's one of them. So you have to go through the diet and say, okay, what are you exactly feeding here, and how much? It's a very, very common thing. I'm feeding light feed, but way under feeding light feed. A lot of that. No exercise. These horses aren't moving around, so if they're not getting any exercise, as Dr. Van Epps last year or the year before was talking about, you get less circulation to the feet, less circulation, less growth to the foot, and of course less muscle, which that makes insulin go up. Less muscle right there. Vitamin E deficiencies. Often these insulin-resistant horses, again, because they're in such an inflammatory state, their vitamin E's are often very, very low. And of course, what are they on? They're not often are on all grass and all grain. 0 and 0 for vitamin E, or very close. Very, very, very close. So most your insulin-resistant horses are also low vitamin E just because they're not getting enough grass, fresh grass, or like this time of the year, there is no fresh grass with any. Vitamin E's levels almost drop to 0 by the end of October. I don't care if it looks okay or there's maybe still a little green. It's the vitamin E levels are almost 0, and they might stay to 0 till April. So a lot of these horses need supplementation. Chronic pain, causing breathing problems. Remember, we were talking about with chronic pain also causes insulin resistance too, but chronic pain also causes breathing. If I drop an anvil on your foot, you don't just sit there breathing normally. You're, and the same with horses. When you see a horse in pain, this horse is, he's puffing. Okay. Now imagine he's puffing and he's got COPD and he's trying to breathe. You're creating a tremendous stress on these horses. So if that horse is painful with laminitis and COPD, boy, you've got to get in the game pretty quick. And I put down here consequences of these. Or of course, as farriers, you're not going to be shooting these horses very much, are you? COPD, you know what? We're going to kick them out. My granddaughter, she's going to be starting a trimming program, and she'll just take care of his feet. And all of a sudden, whoop! I just lost a client. I lost a horse. I still have a client, but I lost a horse. And all of a sudden, with insulin-resistant horses, he's chronically laminitic. Oh, you know what? We're just going to stick him on a dry lot. We're not going to do anything with him anymore. We don't need very much anymore. And so all of a sudden, the consequences are just less horses to work on. Not good. These are what you're going to be seeing. Laminitis on good programs. They're doing everything right, but the horse, especially for insulin resistance, but the horse is still in laminitis. Oh yeah, by the way, he's on clenbuterol, he's on steroids, he's got bad breathing problems, he's always got infections, all adding onto insulin resistance. You don't get those three taken care of, I don't care what kind of nutritional program you got, it's going to fail. You've got to treat them both at the same time. Of course, you get the, this thing's sensitive. You got white Lyme disease, of course, that we're seeing here. You get that the laminar stretching. When people talk about laminar stretching of high insulin and insulin resistance, it's tough for your clients to understand. What do you mean by that? Insulin, like Doug Anderson with his talk the other night. What do you mean by that? What do you mean? And you have to be able to tell them, okay, if I was standing on a column of the White House, that could hold me up. But if I stretched that all the way to the moon and it was the thickness of a pencil and I stepped on it, it would crumble. And that's exactly what happens with these horses with laminar stretching. It starts crumbling here, and that junction between the sole and the wall, it just falls apart. Poor hoof quality, well, we're getting less oxygen to the feet. We're getting a lot of hormonal changes. We're getting too much glucose. We're getting too much insulin. Or nutritionally, we got a lot of problems. And gee, I wonder why I'm having trouble. Why are my clients crabby? Well, you got to get into it. Dirt lot problems. I'm not a dirt lot fan, especially with people that got big beautiful places. They're like, we got to get this horse out of here. But they add on to your shoeing problems. Trust me, they're stomping flies a lot more in a dirt lot than they're out in the field, and a lot of mud, a lot of problems. You really don't want your clients thinking insulin resistance is going to be cured on a dirt lot. It's going to send you down a road of a lot of problems. You're like, wait, can't we? Let's get it on another program. This is a very common one, especially this time of year with insulin resistance. Just post-trim sore for no reason. Nothing wrong, nothing different. The trim was just completely normal as always. Talented farrier took care of it. Next day the horse is crippled, and they call and go, I guess you cut him too short. And I'm like, oh, well, no, I don't think I did. I don't think so. And that's because these horses have, and this will be another thing with horses that are too thin and old, with horses that are older, getting insulin resistance. And this is going to be coming more and more about these horses with neuropathic pain. We're just starting that as veterinarians to understand that this pain problem and these nerves that have been damaged. Same with people with insulin resistance and diabetes. These nerves have been damaged and they start spontaneously firing for no reason. We don't know why. And all of a sudden they get allodynia, too much pain for a normal condition and over-exaggerated response. But when you see that, that's a flag. I think we might have to get this horse, maybe tested for his insulin resistance, do that K-Row challenge. Puffing and over 12 years old, and he's dripping snot all over you. You better. There's something wrong here. Or I've noticed this horse getting really skinny because he's not eating and he's burning a lot of calories from just trying to breathe. Time to consult. Time to ask the owner. And I think this conference has really touched on something that's great, and that is, Mrs. Smith, can I call the veterinarian? I'd like to talk to him about this horse. I've got some concerns. Not, Mrs. Smith, will you call the vet? And it just drops off. And you never, maybe she did, maybe she didn't. You don't know. Maybe he said something. And then, yes, you get this, as Tim was talking with Dr. G the other day, you get this miscommunication and muddling. And so time to consult. Say, can I call? And the same with me. I'm going to go, you know what, I think this is going backwards, and this might be a problem. I want to talk to the farrier and ask him, have you seen anything going on with this horse? Consequences, of course, less horses. That's what they're going to be seeing, laminitis on steroids and clenbuterol. Maybe they don't know about that clenbuterol being a problem. Maybe they don't know that it's causing more Cushing's. Extended clenbuterol, we talked about that. Pergolide not controlling. This is a big O. This is a big O. I get this probably at least, we do approximately 500 new laminitis cases a year. I'd say at least 100 of them are my horse is on Pergolide and it's not controlling it and he's getting worse and worse and worse. What's happening? Well, remember, all these problems that they're creating more Cushing's. The clenbuterol, the weight loss, all these things, the steroids, all these are making Cushing's also worse. The hypoxia, as we had talked about, and affecting the pituitary. Insulin resistance numbers are going up. They don't know why. Why is it going up? Well, because maybe these medications that he's on and because he's losing muscle mass. We can't stop it. Okay, we're going to have to step in here. We got to do something. Thyroid starts to drop because of the hypoxia and the inflammation of COPD, but also insulin-resistant horses are barely normal, most of them. And vitamin E is dropping. Vitamin E is a vasodilator. If it's low, we're not getting the blood flow that we need. If we're not getting the blood flow we need, we're not getting nutrients and oxygen to the feet, then the feet start falling apart. And you have a tough time putting a nail to anything there. Weight loss, but insulin resistant up, as we talked about with older horses and Cushing horses. 4 steps of easy steps. I need easy in my life, and I found that most of my clients do too. You start giving people 10-step programs, their eyes just glaze, and you might get 1 or 2. And so you really have to make life easy. So with COPD, often with these horses, if it's a chronic year-round problem especially, hay soaking can be a benefit. Often omegas, there's a good article there about that showed that could decrease coughing by 50%. I'll tell people go get some chia seed, very cheap. Thyroid helps with these horses, and then supplementation. I also, with COPD horses, when they say I'd like to go riding, he's improving, I'll ask them, would you please wash his mouth out with a garden hose or a big syringe every time before you go riding? And the reason I did that, I saw a horse on the treadmill at New Bolton Center, and we're watching it, the upper airway, and then they pop it down into the trachea, and we're watching, all of a sudden, zoop! And I was like, what was that? Zoop! Little pieces of hay being sucked down into the trachea, down into the lungs. I'm like, holy mackerel. So little pieces of things, when of food in their mouths, they can all of a sudden accidentally start aspirating these things. Now that was at heavy exercise. I don't know about just trail riding, but I tell people, wash the horse's mouth out. And then I have this thing here with beer, because it's an old racetrack, item to help with horses that have cooling issues. My wife has a COPD Icelandic, and so we give them a can of beer with this program, and he slurps it up. If you have problems with getting supplements in a horse, I like sugar-free applesauce. You can do sugar-free pancake syrup too, but sometimes it doesn't work. But I can tell you, half a can of beer or even a full can in a big horse, they will knock you down to get to it. And remember, a can of like Busch beer, it's only 100 calories. And so if you eat half a can, it's 50 calorie. And people are like, oh, I'm worried about insulin resistance. And see, with the carbohydrate. Well, remember now, your horses, that's 50 calories. Your horses, big horse is going to go between around 25,000 calories a day. So that 50 calories, okay, that's like a BB of chocolate to us. It's not going to do a whole bunch of good. So then we go with insulin resistance. We'll talk about hay. We want to just extend hay out and find out the right amount of hay. If they're overweight, maybe we have to drop our percentage of body weight in hay to 1.8 or 1.6% of body weight. And then slow feeders, of course, that a lot of places sell. Balancers. I like balancers because they're easy and simple, and you only have to feed about 1 pound per horse. 1,000-pound horse. They also are higher in protein, so they help with increasing muscle, and of course that helps COPD and insulin resistance. So that can be helpful. Thyroid powder on these horses, I'll tell them often to go ahead and put them on it and then have your veterinarian test them in 30 days, or they can test before and retest in 30 days. And then we talked about how pain increases insulin resistance. And Cushing's makes insulin resistance worse, right? Because we're losing all that muscle mass, increases glucose, and ACTH breaks down the keys of insulin resistance, or of insulin. And then COPD, it also makes COPD worse, of course, because of higher glucose levels in the lung secretions. And then COPD, of course, makes Cushing's worse because the hypoxia starts breaking down dopamine receptors in the brain. So they're all interacting. I think that's something for you guys to understand, that wait a minute, all these things are combining. We can't just think that he's only Cushing's or he's only this or only that. That these things are intertwining. These are balancers that are on the website. You know, many of them on the market, as you can see, a bunch of them, very close brothers. All these. Thyroid powder we talked about. The flax or chia for reducing coughs by up to 60% in a study. You can read about that. I like chia simply because you don't have to grind it. Most flax you have to grind, but chia you don't have to. That's our goal. We want to get them out there moving. We want them to be healthy. We want them to get on the right amount of grass, and while we're monitoring how things are going. We talked about the co-management of these things. Ration balancer and thyroid and omegas, how they can help. That can help also insulin resistant. Turnout, we want more exercise. How many miles do you think, if a horse was turned out in a 10-acre field with a couple of buddies, what do you think the average is that they walk around? Yeah, that's exactly right. Minimum, but usually 5 up to 15 miles. Okay, so when people will talk about dirt lot, well, I'm going to keep my horse and survive them on a dirt lot. I don't care how much you lunge. You're not going to get there. You're not going to get there with 15 minutes one way and 15 minutes the other, right? Or riding around the ring for half an hour. You're just not going to get there. So you're talking about 5 at a low end to up to 15 in an average to high end of walking all day long. It's wonderful, wonderful therapy, and of course it's great for feet. Bedding. We talked about with COPD, we want to avoid straw at all costs simply because it's huge organic dust. Snacks, you want to go with low carb snacks. I like hay cubes chopped up in 2 or 3 pieces. They're great little cookies. Peanuts in the shell are easy too for these horses. Winter, we talked about the winter quote, winter laminitis. And those are actually not laminitis horses. Those are horses with past laminitis that have had nerve damage, like in diabetic people feet, that then when you come and you do a routine trim, all of a sudden are sore, or everybody else is walking across the frozen mud and there's this horse, ooh, 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 ooh. And that's usually not true laminitis. Signs of, quote, winter laminitis that you're going to see most often is that the pain in the middle of the winter, or especially if it goes like if it's 50 and it's down to 10, a big drop, or if it's really super cold for 4 or 5 days, under 10 degrees. And these horses become very, very, very sore. And often will happen to them, unfortunately what will happen with that is sometimes people will go, well, I heard it's good to ice my horse's feet when he's got laminitis, so we're going to stick him out there in the 2 feet of snow all day. And he's getting worse and worse and worse. And then you look at him and you're like, well, there's no pulses and the Hoof test's normal and he's actually pretty good, and they take x-rays and they're actually better or the same as they were 6 months ago. Well, this doesn't look like a case of active laminitis. Well, it's not. It's nerve pain and nerve damage from past laminitis popping up. But make sure you don't take blame for a routine trim and the horse is sore in the middle of the winter, especially if he was walking around on hard ground. All of a sudden, no, that's a horse I would recommend. Maybe, can I call a veterinarian? We need to talk to him. Oh, sure, no problem. This is, of course, the Olympics and Usain Bolt, and I got this here, so hopefully you guys will be a little bit ahead of the crowd, on these things, that when you see these horses, and you might be able to help your clients avoid laminitis from either, treatments that they didn't realize that maybe were not going to be great if they keep them extended, or horses that have Cushing's and other problems. COPD and insulin resistance, that's our goal. Let's get going. I like that little horse there. So every conference and every talk, you hopefully get some golden nuggets of information that COPD and a bad breathing horse is affecting your hoof quality, and it's going to be increasing insulin-resistant and Cushing problems in your horse. You need to know that. And it's not just a bad breathing horse you're just going to keep going on and chewing. Eventually, he's going to have a problem. Thyroid pain can help with reducing foot pain. I think there's 3 articles on there. I think it's fascinating. I think it's totally stumbled across that. The clenbuterol can increase insulin resistance and Cushing's, and you have to be careful that your clients are not using these too much. That steroids make insulin resistance worse simply by increasing glucose and losing muscle mass. And infections of any kind increase insulin resistance. So that horse with chronic pneumonia, chronic foot infections from surgeries and all this, they're trying to put them together, colic surgeries and all that. He's getting salmonella, doc, and all of a sudden, he becomes, it looks like he's starting to get laminitis. Well, he's not getting laminitis simply because of endotoxemia. He's also getting laminitis from insulin resistance of being hospitalized and from being infected. Pretty interesting. Thyroid levels drop in COPD, vitamin levels drop in, E drops in that, weight loss in COPD increases insulin resistance, weight loss of Cushing's increases insulin resistance. This next one, I think it's important, and sometimes people's eyes pop out on this, that this study was done at least 2 years ago. And it was in the American Farrier Journal here. And one of the things is that these horses that only Cushing's, okay, they tested them, they did the challenges, it was only Cushing's. They would do microscopic analysis of these feet, and these were in older horses, of course, and there was no signs of laminitis in these horses, no signs. So when people say, my horse got laminitis and I put him on pergolide, and he's still getting kind of laminitis, so then we put him on 2 pills and 3 pills and 4 pills. And of course then, number one side effect of pergolide is anorexia. Now he's not eating. Well, that's not good. That's not good. How are we going to nutrify the feet? So you need to understand that Cushing's alone is not causing laminitis. And you're not going to prevent and stop it from occurring again just with pergolide. That's not going to happen. That you have to have Cushing's and insulin resistance together, all right? That Cushing's is causing further insulin resistance, and of course with weight loss will eventually probably turn into insulin resistance. I would say true only Cushing's is pretty rare, maybe 10 to 20%. Most of these have the country cousin of insulin resistance right next to them. And then this last one so that sometimes people's minds just, whoa, what do you mean Cushing's doesn't cause laminitis? Well, no, not by itself, it doesn't. It needs help. And then heartache of horse euthanasia and laminitis. The disease is not the end game, it's owner sadness. And I'll tell people, so how many veterinarians and farriers have ever seen horses that died of laminitis? They think of secretariat and all these horses, and the answer is no horse ever died of laminitis. Never died of laminitis. They died of heartache. I can't take it anymore. I can't take the treatments. I can't see him in pain. I can't see him suffering. COPD, I can't see him. He's suffocating. It's too much. And so what really gets these horses is this. So our jobs as veterinarians, farriers, remember, our job is really, we're in the same game. We're in the comfort business, right? You want my horses happy and healthy and comfortable. And if we're having problems with that and we're not working together, it's going to be a problem. I can give them the best medications in the world, and if I'm not getting cooperation from the farrier, it's not going to work. If the farrier is putting on an incredible shoe, but he's not getting the backup of some testing and some hormonal information, it's going to fall apart. It's going to fall apart pretty quick. All right. I don't know. What time is it here? Let's see. What does my clock say? 2:40. So how many do we have? 2:45? Goes to 2:45? Okay, right there's a question.
With all the balances out there, how do we as farriers navigate that and make recommendations?
That's a great question. How do we as veterinarians and farriers pick and choose balancers? Okay, I had that exact same dilemma. And you saw that big chart I had, and that's on our website too. Because I could start getting into a dilemma of all of a sudden, oh, he likes Purina. Oh, he likes Triple Crown. Oh, he likes Buckeye Feed, And then all of a sudden, you get into like conflicts of interest, and you get some awkwardness, and all of a sudden, what do you mean? I thought that was good, and my friend said that was the best. And so I give them the big list. Okay, you pick, because they might already have you know, M30 in there already. I'm like, well, okay, well that's good. Or they might say, okay, I've got Triple Crown Light in the feed bin, and I'd say, okay, well you're a Triple Crown person, so instead of that, why don't you get Triple Crown 30? They already have a dealer with Triple Crown. So I'll just say, I want to make it easy on the client. So you've got the list, you can copy that off on our website. You can stick that in your truck, and so the next time you go there, well, what are you using? You know, I'm using Buckeye. Okay, Buckeye Grow and Win. Okay, Triple Crown 30, Purina Enrich 32, or a Nutrina Empower Top Line. You can just go through and pick out the ones, or if they don't have one around, you can say, here's a list. Go around your feed companies, go to Tractor Supply, go to and try to find whatever one of these here to do. That's a very good question. So I stepped out of that by saying, pick the one next to you that you can get.
I have two quick questions. Hopefully they're quick. But is albuterol the same as clenbuterol as far as potential problems with the insulin-resistant horse? And is there any contraindication if you use NAC or supplementation on a COPD horse that has insulin resistance?
The acetylcysteine?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen any problems with that in literature. And then acetylcysteine for horses with COPD. And I'd have to look into that. You know, it's the whole thing. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know. I'm not going to guess and then find out the guy was totally wrong. So I don't know on that with that one. Albuterol and clenbuterol and salmeterol, they're all very close brothers. And I'd have to look into that, but most likely, yes, because they're in the same beta family.
In my area, to go to albuterol first.
Right. It's cheaper.
Right.
It's cheaper.
That's why I was curious, because that's the most common treatment is steroids and albuterol. So I'm curious to know if there's any kind of...
I would probably guess yes. I would say have the veterinarian go to the website and copy off the thing about the clenbuterol from horses, showing that it actually does increase insulin resistance, and say possible pink flag, maybe not red, but you know, because we might not have all the facts on if it does, but probably yes. If I had to guess, I'd say be careful. One of the things what we always would do with clenbuterol is it comes in this big jar, and it's very expensive. And so all of a sudden, the lazy thing would be to just hand them a big jar. It's like $300 or $400. Well, it's ridiculous. You don't need that, all that. So we'd break it up and say, okay, usually for a 1,000-pound horse, 5 cc's in the morning, 5 cc's at night, 10 cc's times 5. Here's a 50 cc little jar to suck up, and it wouldn't be expensive. It'd be like $25. Okay, I can handle that financially. But often they want to just give it the whole bottle, and you just can't afford it. Yes? The question was, when you're working on these things that combine insulin resistance COPD, do you change your level of levothyroxine? And the first thing we'll do is, we'll definitely test them at least 30 days after whatever you're going to start. I'll go usually in a 1,000-pound horse, a couple scoops, which is 12 milligrams a scoop, so 24 milligrams. And I've never had one where I've shot them right out of normal into 4.0 and 5.0, even if you're just blind doing it and then testing 30 days later. But yeah, I will retest those horses at least every 6 months. Yeah, because the other thing about thyroid sickness and also sometimes inflammation itself can drop down in thyroid. And yes, you can self-correct. So he might need 2 at sometimes. He might, it's still not near 3. He might need 3 scoops. And then 6 months later, okay, we can drop it down to 2 scoops. So I do it with these guys every 6 months. That's a good question about rechecking thyroid. Yes?
I've only been familiar with insulin resistance testing requiring a fasting period. The carob syrup
Yes.
test, would you repeat?
Yeah, and that you can see that. You can download that test on our website under insulin resistance, and then also at Tufts Veterinary School. If you put Google Tufts Veterinary School equine carob syrup challenge, it'll pop up on their website. They designed that test. It was brilliant. Now that was often animals precede human. Well, that one's where we took that information from human medicine, where you get these 500-pound guys and they test their insulins in the morning on fasting. It's normal. It's impossible. That's ridiculous. And so all of a sudden they realized they have to challenge these guys and they do it too, and that's in human medicine. It's a glucose challenge. We use carob syrup in veterinary medicine. Glucose challenge, insulin response test. And that's the gold standard now. So often what was happening with that is it takes away all the variables, right? All of a sudden, well, we did feed them at night, but then this one didn't get fed at night, and this one only got hay, but then this one's got grain, or we were doing the test at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then he had eaten a couple hours before, maybe it was 5 hours before. and it was on grass or on dirt lot. You're wait a minute. I want to be able to test with that Kara syrup test. I can kind of compare a horse, a Morgan in California, to a Tennessee Walker in Kentucky.
How long has that been?
That's been since 2012. AAP, Tufts presented that. And Dr. Nicholas Franks, brilliant study, because it just takes out all these variables. And Dr. A wants to do a fasting, and Dr. B wants to do it right after doing lunch, and you can't get a hold on it because half the time you're not feeding and eating and then when you want to go retest them, well, I got hung up, so the first horse was tested at 10 o'clock in the morning, I know, and then when I got hung up, I'll test them at 3 o'clock. Well, woo, apples and pears, so it's tough. So that takes all that out of it. You got to be in the morning, got to be before it's fed, small amount of hay during the night beforehand. Kara syrup, an hour later, one blood test, boop, done. Very repeatable, so I think it's the best word. Yes. I can't hear you. Well, why are people misappropriating and using percent Pergolide in these Cushing horses? And I know Dr. Meyer's seen this 100 times with these horses. They're a 7-year-old horse and they're on percent. Wait a minute, whoa. This horse doesn't have Cushing's. This horse has insulin resistance, but it's getting mixed up. They just don't understand that. I'm like, so as soon as I hear a horse is having percent that's very young, yes, it's a problem. So often, like an older horse, if he really has true Cushing's and he tests high ACTH, then most of those horses. You're going to be testing the ACTH level of the horse for Cushing's, and then you're also going to be testing the insulin at the same time. So often they're only doing the ACTH. Oh, he's not long hair, let's test the ACTH. They put him on percent. 6 months later, he's got laminitis. What happened? We had him on the right drug. Well, no, he was Cushing's and insulin resistance. You need to test them both at the same time. So the percent didn't fail, it just didn't get supported right. And that's when all of a sudden percent gets a bad name. But often people call, I got a Cushing horse and he's 5 years old. Wait, whoa. No, that's not possible. Yes, I'll get to you. Go ahead. That was a problem in the old days, where where Pergolide had to be compounded, okay, because it was pulled off the human shelves. We used it for human form, but it was causing cardiac problems, so FDA banned it. So then all of a sudden we don't have any Pergolide. So then compounding pharmacies were making Pergolide from bulk, which was great, but the problem was sometimes it was powder, sometimes it was a syrup, sometimes it was a tablet. And all of the strengths of these things were unknown. And any time it was in a syrup, and I would see this, I learned the hard way, I kept that syrup for a long time. I just keep it in the back of my truck. That truck would be 100 degrees, and then one next day 90 degrees. And all of a sudden, when I was handing somebody a bottle of Pergolide syrup, I was having a bottle of water, but I didn't know it until I retested the ACTH 2 months later. I'm like, oh, this stuff's not working at all. And I'd yell and scream at the pharmacy, what's going on here? Well, they could have had a good amount of Pergolide in there, but I didn't keep it refrigerated. We didn't know that. So there was so much variable with this, and then finally Ingermeyer, however you pronounce that company, they now have percent tablets which are FDA approved, and you don't have to worry about that. So they're stable up to 2 years. You just pop in the horse's mouth or a little grain, boop, eat it. So it's easy and simple. So there are still people doing compounding, but it's still variable. You're not really sure of the strengths. There's no testing behind it, so it gets a little complicated. So I would recommend doing the pill. It's not cheap, but if you're really trying to knock that ACTH down, it can be very effective. It's a good product. Yeah. Oh, wait, I gotta be just one more guy.
You said something about the timing of horses being on pasture more at night. Now, I was understanding that first thing in the morning was better since photosynthesis was driving the metabolism of the plant all day and storing the sugars in the plant more. It would be highest in the evening, lowest.
Yeah, well, you're talking early morning, and then so if you want 5 o'clock, there's a lot of people aren't going to do it. Oh no, I'm not. And then all of a sudden you start getting into, well, I'd like to turn them out for 8 hours, and then wait a minute, we're in the middle of the afternoon here now. So it's not, early morning. You are correct, because it's just dropping all night, dropping, and then that is the low period. So that's something we'll do for some people that'll say in the beginning, look, we're only going to start at an hour a day, and we're going to have a muzzle. Okay, and then we're going to do an hour a day for a week, then we're going to go 2 hours a day for a week and 3 hours a day. And that is a great way to do that. Start in the morning like that, because it is lowest then. But yeah, nighttime, it does drop throughout the day. And then cutting these grasses, often people cut them too short. I tell people to pull that blade up, and no lower than 4 inches, because that helps with lowering sugars down and helps insulin. So big man tells me to cut it off, man. He owns the place. I got to cut it off. But thank you, guys. You got a question? You can come over here. How you doing, man? Frank Reilly. Let me turn this thing off. Whoop, whoop, whoop.